Diesel Bunk. Title of the story is The Palace of Osiris by Craig Gavrish. You even think of brushing that limey foot of yours against my leg one more time, Mr. Alistair Crowley, Tabitha said as she leaned across the table. And you'll be walking lopsided for the rest of your short, miserable life. Now pull it back before I use it to feed the poor and homeless of Russia. She was close enough to the fat, balding British man's face that she could smell the stale opium and gin exuding from his pores. The wizard retracted his foot from Tabitha's calf, a meek look on his face. Tabitha leaned back in her seat. Now, she said, folding her calloused hands firmly in front of her, back to what I was saying. You may think your little order, what was it called again? The AA. The AA? Like 2 letters? Yes. What do the letters stand for? Its true meaning, madam, is hidden from the uninitiated. Tabitha snorted. Right, she said. Well, you and your little secret order ain't getting your hands on that artifact. It done been shipped across the ocean, spent more weeks on trains than a dog's got ticks, and I mean to bring it back to the Knights Templar. You and your companeros go ahead and pack on up before I get testy. She turned in her chair and hollered at the waiter for service, her voice rising above the general drunken roar of the proletariat. The cafe where they were sitting was smoky and crowded, everyone shouting and passing what Tabitha could only assume were political pamphlets around. That's Russians for you. When it came to politics, people just shout about it until everyone else agreed they were right. A lot like America, come to think of it. Tabitha realized Crowley was still saying something, but before she could turn to ask him why he hadn't left yet, the waiter arrived. He didn't speak any English, but luckily he and Tabitha both spoke enough Czech for her to order a panini and a small bottle of vodka. Panini was like a little meat pie, and it was like finding a little piece of Omaha, Nebraska's Little Bohemia in Russia. She smiled faintly at the prospect of the food. These Russians knew how to make a good meat pie. She turned back to Crowley. You still yammering? Miss Piotrowski. That's Dame Piotrowski to you, Crowley. Only gentlemen get to call me Miss. Dame Piotrowski, then. Fine, I'd rather prefer that honorific to the dry miss. Hold your hurry the fuck up, Crowley. Crowley held his hands up, palm out. Dame Piotrowski, I'd like to offer you an exchange that I truly believe will be worth your while. Offer away. I can offer you knowledge of the most revelatory secret of antiquity. Is it God's everlasting forgiveness? Crowley laughed deeply. God's everlasting forgiveness? More like freedom from that archaic framework of belief, from that child's fairy. Listen here, fat man. You may think God ain't real, but I sure as hell know he is. I murdered 2 people in cold blood, and I was told by one of them 6 months later how I could be forgiven. So for the last 10 years, I've been redeeming myself. I fought demons, devils, shoggoths, lycanthropes, skinwalkers, undead Vikings, Quetzalcoatl, and a few hundred other things I prefer not to name just because they might pop in and say hello. Every time I fight my way out, I know I'm one step closer to forgiveness. So you got any forgiveness for a woman who shot her husband and his lover? No, Crowley said loudly, sinking a little in his chair. Reckon that's too bad then. I once was contacted by an angel. It was many years ago in Egypt. I was too. Last week, in fact. Metatron itself flew into my colder than a witch's teeth ship cabin while on the way here from bumfuck Norway. Told me I was going to meet a fat, limey magician that couldn't take a hen. Said God wouldn't mind if I beat him until shit ran out of his ears. Also suggested I leave him naked as the day he was born in the Petrograd Alley. Reckon I wasn't sure what he was talking about then, but I guess I am now. Waiter arrived with Tabitha's food and set it on the table. The young man left to get her vodka in a glass while she stared into Crowley's wilting face. After a moment, Tabitha narrowed her eyes further and said, "This place makes the best damn panini I've ever had. Reminds me an awful lot of the wounds that my granny made before she passed. When that waiter comes back with my drink, I'm going to start eating that delicious meat-filled dough. And I'm going to enjoy it, Mr. Crowley. So much that I ain't going to remember you're still here. But you know what will happen when I finish eating that only piece of childhood joy and warmth I have in this whole goddamn country? You will recall once again that I am here?" Tabitha nodded. "Yes," said Crowley instead. He began fishing in his pocket. "Yes, Dame Piotrowski, I believe I understand. I will be going now. I'd like to pay for your dinner so that there will perhaps be no hard feelings." He put a wad of rubles on the table. Crowley bowed slightly and turned to leave just as the waiter was returning. The waiter put the bottle and the glass on her table. Tabitha thanked him with a nod of her head and poured herself a drink. Russia may be cold, the crazies may be in town, she may have been far from the country and wide open plains she loved, but at least the vodka was the best she'd ever tasted. Wow.